We're just days away from the HBO prequel series House of the Dragon about the Targaryen dynasty set 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones. The hype is real as this is looking to be an epic show. Game of Thrones had only 4 Targaryen male characters and 1 female character, Daenerys Targaryen. I just made a video about all of her costume looks if you want to check it out. Now, for the sake of this video, we're looking at the costumes worn by the men from House Targaryen featured in the HBO series Game of Thrones. But before we proceed, there will be spoilers for Game of Thrones if you haven't watched all 8 seasons yet. And I will touch briefly on House of the Dragon, but that will be spoiler-free. Let's begin with Maester Aemon, played by Peter Vaughan, Master of the Citadel and bound in service to Castle Black and the Night's Watch. However, Aemon was born Aemon Targaryen and is the great-uncle to Daenerys, Viserys, and Rhaeghar Targaryen. When Aemon refused the throne after the death of his older brother because of his sworn duty to the Maesters and the Night's Watch, it was passed on to his younger brother Aegon. Aemon wears the robes of the Maesters, similar to that of a monk's cassock, and under that a linen shift. His rough cloth robes are dyed black, like the clothes of the men who swear an oath of duty to the Night's Watch, and the volume of fabric is gathered at the back in soft pleats. His robes appear well worn as there are areas of his costume that are patched and darned. There is also some ingenuity where they have used leftover armor bits, like mail rings, to patch up the holes in the robe. Aemon also wears a maester's chain, which includes links of gold, iron, lead, silver, tin, and other metals. Viserys Targaryen, played by Harry Lloyd, is the son of Mad King Aerys II Targaryen and was introduced in the pilot. During Robert's Rebellion, Viserys and his baby sister Daenerys were smuggled across the narrow sea on the continent of Essos. As the show begins, Viserys and Dany are living in exile as the guests of Illyrio Mopatis of Pentos, who provides food, shelter, and clothing, while Viserys plots his way back to the Iron Throne. In the books, it's mentioned that Viserys prefers to dress in silks and wools. It might be surprising, but he only has 3 costumes for Season 1. The first costume is when Viserys is presenting Daenerys with her barely there viewing gown, his coat of gray slub silk, fitted trousers, and short boots. Of course, he has the silver blonde hair of House Targaryen worn shoulder length. While Viserys was a child when they escaped Dragonstone, costume designer Michele Clapton has stated in her book, Game of Thrones: The Costumes, that Viserys remembers the clothing of House Targaryen. His Asian-inspired Targaryen wrap coat is echoed in the costumes worn in King's Landing, like the women wearing kimono-style gowns, Lysa Arryn and Cersei Lannister's dressing gowns, and the armor of House Lannister. The gambesons worn under the Kingsguard armor, as we see on Sir Jaime Lannister, have the same left-over-right overlap with the tie closures. The silhouette of Viserys' coats are elegant and very slim, with little flare in the skirts except at the back for some ease, showing that while Viserys is a lanky beggar king, he takes care of his appearance. Now, Viserys' color palette is charcoal and black with accents of dark red like we see in his collar and sigil applique of the 3-headed dragon. His collars are made from this really interesting scaly Arctic dragon leather from Chase Irwin. It's actually salmon leather that's been dyed in multiple colors. Daenerys wears a bodice made from this same fabric in Season 1. The gray costume Viserys wears when he presents Dany to Khal Drogo has a white version of the same salmon leather collar and hanging tassels with just a hint of red beading. Viserys attaches a sash to his coat with a silver 3-headed dragon brooch. He also uses it to fasten his coat. Daenerys wears the same brooches with her viewing gown and wedding gown. 3 brooches were custom made for the show by Steenson's Jewelers in Ireland. Steenson said that the dragon heads and silver circles were initially created on CAD and 3D milled in wax. The finer detail on the dragon heads were then hand-carved in the wax before casting them in silver. The swords were made by filling and shaping steel. While Viserys starts out all neatly dressed beginning in the episode Winter is Coming, with his collar tightly fastened, it all begins to unravel for him as season 1 progresses, Viserys rejecting Daenerys' attempt to provide him with Dothraki clothing. Not designed for the nomadic life, his set of clothes become more distressed as he sees himself losing grip on his plan to take back the Iron Throne until Drogo gives him the golden crown he so desired. If you're enjoying this content, consider subscribing. Despite Viserys' death in Season 1, his influence reigns on. Michele Clapton said in her book that in the final seasons of Game of Thrones, she gave Dany an ever more aggressive silhouette that pulls her closer and closer to Viserys' costumes. Daenerys is drawn toward her brother's style without even quite realizing it until, by the end, she's fully adopted his look. For his secret wedding to Lyanna Stark, the Bran sees in his vision of the past, Rhaeghar Targaryen, portrayed by Wolf Scolding, wears the long-line doublet with shoulder wings that, according to Clapton, is a common style for the wealthy lords in Westeros. I wasn't super jazzed about this costume when I first saw it, but now over time it has grown on me and I think it fits into the world of Game of Thrones. Something that I didn't notice until I made this video is that the fabric of the main part of the jacket is made of this cord fabric from Chase Irwin in the color Atlantic. It's the same fabric that was worn by Sansa Stark in her wedding to Ramsay Bolton in the color Platinum. And I thought I'd point out that while the dragon sigil in Game of Thrones most often has 2 legs, Rhaegar and Viserys are wearing the emblem with 4 legs, the same one used by King Viserys I Targaryen in the new show House of the Dragon. King Viserys is also wearing the sigil on his tunic. House of the Dragon showrunner Ryan Condal told Entertainment Weekly, "I will say every choice we made on this show, down to even smaller minutiae than that sigil, was made with a reason. I would say stay tuned, but I also say that the sigil that you're seeing in the show, you will see in the original show as well." Another thing that I want to point out is that Rhaegar and Viserys are wearing the same belt with the little gold dragon belt mounts, and that they have the same sword with a golden dragon pommel and crossguard with the terminals of the barb bent down towards the blade. I'm not sure how it would have worked out that Viserys would have ended up with this sword. In the books, Viserys wears a borrowed sword to look more kingly. Last but not least is Mad King Aerys II Targaryen, played in flashback by David Rintoul. Aerys is the father of Rhaegar, Viserys, and Daenerys, and the nephew of Aemon Targaryen. We only catch a glimpse of Aerys' costume, and strangely, Michele Clapton has never talked about it, nor has the costume ever been displayed or exhibited to my knowledge. The show went in another direction from the books, as it's written that due to his fear of being touched, Aerys would not allow anyone to cut his hair, trim his beard, or cut his fingernails. As a result, his hair grew past his shoulders to the waist. Instead, the show has gone with a clean-shaven Aerys with shoulder-length silver hair like the styles worn by Rhaegar and Viserys in the show. Aerys' crown is also different from the books, described by George R.R. Martin as a large and heavy crown of red gold, each of its points a dragon head with gemstone eyes. The one depicted here is closer to the gold stag antler crown worn by King Robert Baratheon, who succeeded Aerys II. While Aerys' crown looks very simple, the points appear sharp enough to cut so that you could use it as a weapon of sorts. Aerys appears to be wearing a houppelande or surcoat, a medieval overgown that was worn in the late 14th and 15th century by men and women. I've mentioned in some other videos that both Sansa and Littlefinger wore versions of this type of garment. In the last decades of the 15th century, a new style of overgown appeared, generally worn unbelted, and featured wide turnback revers and collar. The houppelande, like the one worn by Aerys, has big, loose sleeves and a voluminous amount of fabric in the lower part of the gown. It's hard to make out here, but there are pools of fabric on the floor at the base of the Iron Throne. Aerys' houppelande is trimmed with black or dark brown fur, looking like the fur of sable or marten, which are weasel-like animals. Meanwhile, the oversized fur collar is made up of smaller pelts of fur. During King Henry VIII's reign, Sumptuary laws were enacted to enforce order and obedience to the crown that continued under Queen Elizabeth I until 1600. Part of the law stated that only nobility was allowed to wear the fur of sables in their gowns, kirtles, partlets, and sleeves. Under the houppelande, Aerys wears a long tunic with his leather shoes or boots and a leather belt, although I can't see the decorative belt mounts. Let me know in the comments, what is your favorite Targaryen costume in Game of Thrones, and what Targaryen costume are you most excited to see in the prequel House of the Dragon? Beginning August 23rd at 7 p.m., we will be live streaming reactions to House of the Dragon after the episode airs. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for spending time with me. I'll see you in the next video.